Eventually, I was led to the infectious disease specialist who told me that it was caused by a streptococcal blood infection. And I kept getting many more of them. And they told me I would just have to take antibiotics for the rest of my life. I was absolutely dumbfounded, actually, that they couldn't help me. Now, at that time, culture shock set in, and I really spent a lot of time by myself and within my inner being. And the awareness of the energetic stamps of this life and my past lives started to rise up, and so did an intuitive wisdom from a well deep within me. And a really magical thing happened. I came across a book, just some random book, and I opened up to the page and a sentence that just leapt off the page in front of me. Then the character described his anger as this festering boil that erupted through the surface, and it set off this this inner resonant truth that I could feel in my body. I stopped taking the antibiotics, and I haven't had a boil since. I also had my lifelong eczema disappear. I felt different in my life. And when I was 16, at the time, I couldn't have known the backstory of my neighbor's life. But I learned 30 years later that he'd always carried a gun in his car, and that he had been fired from his lucrative career as a plastic surgeon from stealing narcotics from the hospital that he worked in. It was soon after that he took his own life. So it's crazy, isn't it? It's absolutely crazy. The things that we can feel, that we're ashamed or afraid to talk about, but that we can feel. So I'm here to tell you today that we're entering into a spiritual age. A spiritual age that is an invitation to the energetic realm, the one that you can't see, but that you can feel, sense, and imagine. So I was given a lot of opportunity to enter the energetic realm and to know what it was. In my life from 9 to 12, I started wearing glasses. I had chronic, horrible migraines, and the eczema I told you about, it covered my body all over. Now at the age of 24, I had a streptococcal blood infection that disappeared. And my eczema disappeared, as you knew. At the same time, when I was 24, I got my first reduced prescription and improved my eyesight. Along the way, I also learned how to eradicate my chronic migraines in an instant. I had chronic back pain. I had pre-cervical cancer that turned to a diagnosis of normal overnight. I also had hypothyroid and an autoimmune condition that I don't have any symptoms of despite not taking medications. And I also had an impacted tooth that required surgery that did the same thing. So at the age of 52, I am the healthiest mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, and relationally than I've ever been in my life. So it's a spiritual age that we're entering into. And what that means is that we're leaving what I call the fight, force, or fix paradigm. It's much like diets that don't work. Why cancer patients go into remission only to relapse, and why we keep going back for massage for repetitive injuries. It's the self-harm in the process of what we're doing. Often we seek out ways to alleviate our pain or discomfort, but self-healing is not about feeling good. Masking symptoms are all the temporary fixes. It's about truth. And that's a bitter pill for most people to swallow. So that's what I do. I help people swallow their bitter pills. I help people with chronic and complex conditions when nothing else works. Like Rose, for example, who was a client of mine who suffered for over 20 years with uveitis, which was an autoimmune condition that affects the eyes. And her ophthalmologist said it was the absolute worst case he'd ever seen. So she would take drops when she had her flare-ups that would last 2 to 3 weeks at a time to try to soothe the symptoms. Now, her inner resonant truth was related to an absolute ingrained anger and contempt that she had towards a family member for over 20 years. Once her inner resonant truth settled in, she woke up the next morning with no symptoms. She says to me, that was just the miracle. I can't believe it's that simple. And there's definitely something to this process. And then there was Lee. Lee had 4th stage adrenal fatigue, and she had been trying hard to get better using various methods for about 5 years, where she'd been in chronic pain and fatigue.